First thing, I just need someone to confirm if you can hear me. Can someone confirm, please, if you can hear me?
We can hear
Yes,
you,
sir, we
sir.
can hear you.
All right. Okay, so the first graph was the graph of f of x equal to 3 sine x. So this is the graph, right? This is the graph of f of x equal to 3 sine x. So mark your work. If you sketch the graph, just mark your work. Okay, you are supposed to have a shape like that.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir?
Yes.
We can't see your screen.
Oh, okay. Hold on. All right. So the graph of f of x equal to 3 sine x is this one here. All right. Uh, so we just need now to list the properties. Okay. Hopefully you were able to sketch it and you got a graph like the one on the screen. Right, so the amplitude is equal to 3. It is equivalent to that coefficient, right? Remember what I said, if the coefficient is positive, that's the amplitude. If the coefficient is negative, you take the positive of that negative value, all right? You can also do a calculation, and I gave you a formula, right? Remember, I gave you a formula. The formula which I gave you for amplitude is amplitude is equal to y max minus y minimum all over 2. Y maximum is a 3, y minimum is negative 3. Then we divide that by 2, we get 6 over 2. The final answer will be a 3. So you can also do a calculation if you can't find it by inspection. All right? So that's the amplitude. Then the period of the graph is 360 degrees. Okay. For all your graphs, as I said during the past 2 lessons, I told you that we sketch all our graphs in grade 10, okay, between 0 and 360 degrees. Okay. So for the graph of sine and cos, okay, their periods are 360 degrees. Then the domain, okay, our minimum is 0 degrees, so if x is an element from 0 degrees to 360 degrees. The range, our minimum value of y, it's negative 3, which is the value of y here. Okay, then that value is a negative 3, and the maximum value is the value of y here, which is a positive 3. So, to y is an element, we are starting from x equal to minus 3, so y equal to minus 3 up to positive 3. Alright? So that's what you are supposed to have as part of your answer to the first question. Okay, just allow me as well just to label this graph. Yes, f of x equal to 3 sine x. Okay, so that's what you're supposed to have done. Any question?
No, sir.
All right, if you don't have a question, then let's move on to the next one. Right, the second graph, it was g of x equal to negative 2 sine x. Now, I gave you this one on purpose because I wanted you to use your calculator or your table of values to determine the values of x and y, and then you plot the points. Okay, so if you use your calculator properly, you should have got a table of values, and then this is the graph that you're supposed to get. So this is g of x equal to -2 sine x, right? The amplitude, okay, you can get it from the equation. It is equal to the positive value of that -2. So you take the positive, so the amplitude is a 2. If you decide to do a calculation, amplitude for this graph, it will be equal to y max minus y minimum all over 2, right? Our y maximum is the value of y here, okay? And the value of y here is our minimum, so we'll end up having 2 minus 2 over 2, that will give you 4 over 2, and you get a 2. So you can do, okay, then the period is equal to 360 degrees. The domain, okay, our x values, they start from x equal to 0 degrees up to 360 degrees. And the range, okay, our minimum value is -2, so it will be y is an element. We are starting from -2 up to +2. Right. Now, I'm sure you can see that this graph, it starts with a minimum turning point as compared to a maximum turning point. That is due to a reflection which took place. And I'm going to talk about reflection probably tomorrow. If I can't talk about it tomorrow, then maybe sometime early next week. Okay, but I'll talk about reflection separately and give you some of the reflection rules. In this case, we are talking about reflection rule for reflection about the x-axis. All right. Any question? If you don't have a question, then number three. Number three is the graph of h of x equal to 2 cos x. H of x equal to 2 cos x. So that's the shape of h of x equal to 2 cos x. So first thing, you determine the amplitude. The amplitude is going to be equal to the coefficient of cos x, which is a 2, right? Also, we can do a calculation. So amplitude is equal to y max minus y minimum all over 2. Right? So our maximum value here is a 2 there. And our minimum is a -2, which is there. So that will be 2 minus 2 all over 2. You get 4 over 2, which is the 2. Right? Then the period is 360 degrees. The domain, we are starting from x equal to 0 up to 360 degrees. The range, okay, our minimum is -2, and our maximum is +2. All right. Now, I'm just going to give you, I'm just going to ask you a question. This is an extra question which I didn't ask you in the past, just to check your understanding so far. If I were to ask you and say, for what values of x, okay, for what values of x is h of x less than 0? What would be the answer? Can you tell me for what values of x? This is an extra question. For what values of x is h of x, okay, greater than 0? Remember, h of x are the y values. Remember, h of x is the same as y. So for what values of x is h of x? Sorry, not greater than 0, but let's put less than 0. What would be the answer? I'll give you 1 minute to think. Remember, h of x is y. Can someone tell us the answer? Is there anybody who wants to try? Alright, we don't have too much time, so let me just give you the answer. But your homework for today, I'm going to give you a question like this, or a question of a similar nature. Alright, first thing we need to remember that this h of x is equal to y. So this inequality h of x is less than 0 can be written as y is less than 0. Alright? So if you look at the graph, where is y less than 0? It will be below the x-axis. Okay? It will be below the x-axis. So we are talking about from here up to there. Alright? So between 90 degrees and 270 degrees, the y values of the graph are negative, which means they are less than 0. So the answer to this question will be 90 degrees is less than x, and x is less than 270 degrees. That will be the answer for that question. So between 90 degrees and 270 degrees, the y values of this graph of 2 cos x are less than 0. All right, I'm going to give you a question like this one here. This is part of what's called interpretation. Okay, so we'll do that as we move. All right, so let me move on to the last graph. Is there anybody who has got any question? All right, if you're quiet, then I'll assume that you don't have a question. Then the last graph, well, this one, I gave the name y equal to sine x plus 1, right? Now this one here, the amplitude of this graph, okay, the amplitude is, you can do a calculation if you want, but you can also determine it by finding the coefficient of sine x, it's a 1. So amplitude will be equal to 1. Now, this question I gave you as an extra question just to make you think as well, right? Because of this plus 1 here, it means we have got vertical shift. that represents vertical shift by 1 unit upwards, which means the graph of sin x. So if you, the graph of sin x, or the basic graph of sin x, was moved by 1 unit upwards. Okay, the graph of sin x was moved by 1 unit upwards. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to talk about the graph of tan, but I'll also discuss with you in more detail vertical shift. Okay, but it's not very complicated to understand. If you know how to use a calculator to do a table of values, you should be able to sketch this graph. And I showed you how to use a calculator to determine the table of values. Right, so the period is 360 degrees. The domain is x is an element. We are starting from 0 degrees up to 360 degrees. The range, now the range here, you need to know that the minimum value of y is here. It's here. This is where the minimum value of y is. The maximum value of y is at the maximum turning point. The minimum value is the minimum turning point. So the minimum is 0. So y is an element. We are starting from y equal to 0 up to y equal to 2. Then, if you want to do a calculation of the amplitude to verify, or if you can't determine it from the equation, your amplitude is equal to y max minus y minimum all over 2, right? So here our maximum is 2, minimum is 0, so you get 2 over 2, and the final answer will be the 1. Okay, so you can decide which way you prefer, but generally with the formula you will never go wrong. Okay, with the formula you never go wrong when it comes to finding the amplitude. Right, and also you may have to label your graph. So this is y equal to sin x plus 1. Okay, so that's it there. Is there anybody who has got any question?
No, sir.
Right, if you don't have any question, then for today we'll stop here. I'm going to